This time on Watchers of Tomorrow. Remember when Star Trek had old people makeup? Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Hello everybody, I am Gepwin. Welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the sci-fi critique show that needs a better intro, but we do too many weird things and go on tangents. I am joined as always by my good friend and co-host Dr. Izix.
Hi!
And this week we watched the Let's Make Fun of Old People episode of original series.
A tad, yes. Though I guess for me it ended up being less awful than I was worried about, but it's still kind of really, guys, in a couple bits.
Yeah, there's some weird ones in there. It was mostly boring. It was very boring.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that was kind of repeated, but I think some of that was, had some purpose behind it. Still, it gets a little drawn out.
I was nodding off during the middle of this one.
Oh,
but I watch these late at night generally. Anyway, we watched Star Trek Original Series episode The Deadly Years.
How deadly were they?
It was moderate. Let's see, 5 people died in this one, I guess.
Yeah, I remember
several
there's the one lieutenant, there's the couple people on the planet, and the one they found that was already dead. Was there anybody else?
Well, they said there were like 4 people on the planet, and then one lieutenant dies later.
Spoilers.
This episode was written by someone we haven't encountered before, named David P. Harmon, who is a decently well-known script writer, has one more script for Star Trek coming up in Season 3.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know. At least this one wasn't as bad as some, so we'll see. In Season 3, he wrote an episode called Piece of the Action,
which I have no idea about that one. So
yeah.
Apparently involves mobsters.
Oh, the mobster episode?
I don't think I've seen that one.
That's probably one of the famous ones. I don't know if I've seen it, but I know of it.
More rampant time travel.
No, I think it's a parallel Earth one.
Oh, wow. Another Earth.
They do, like, so many of those, and we haven't gotten to them, so I guess they're all in Season 3. You got Nazi Earth, you got Roman Earth, you got Gangster Earth, you got Old West Earth.
And then the explosion wiped out the 3 cowboy planets on a gangster world.
Star Trek could do its own Crisis on Infinite Earths at this point.
Maybe it should.
Not as many guest stars this episode, because most of the show is on the Enterprise itself. The notable ones are Charles Drake playing Commodore Stalker. He was just in several movies and shows around the same time period, mostly character acting.
Yeah, he's not someone I recognize for anything, but he was apparently in something called Harry O.
Never heard of it.
Neither have I.
Sarah Marshall plays Dr. Janet Wallace. She also appeared on many contemporary shows. The only ones that I had actually heard of are Perry Mason and an episode of The Twilight Zone.
I wonder if I might like Perry Mason now that I'm older.
Yes, at what age do you begin to like Perry Mason?
We should find out.
Should be an annual tradition. Watch it once a year and figure out when you like it. Finally, we have Beverly Washburn playing Lieutenant Arian Galloway, something along those lines. She's not very important. She's just there to show us that things are serious.
Yes, she is not a red shirt, but might as well be.
Mm-hmm.
Now I will mention that there is a fellow, one of the sort of minor characters they run into, doesn't have many lines, who's played by Felix Locker, who is apparently the oldest actor, like, as far as like when they were born, to ever be in Star Trek.
Oh, well, that's fun. And they got to play old people.
In the episode about old people.
Saved them from doing another terrible old age makeup.
Yes. It's like, let's actually get someone who is like of the appropriate age to play someone of the appropriate age, at least as they're supposed to. Yeah, he was born in 1882, by the way.
Ooh, for the 60s? Yeah, that's pretty,
yeah.
It's a pretty long career there. The old people makeup in this is not going to be mentioned very much, but it is horrible.
Generally, yeah. And it's sort of kind of ridiculous how they change color throughout the episode, too.
Yes. Though if there's one thing that I know about special effects makeup, it is that old age makeup is the most difficult makeup to do. Like, hands down.
Because it's like, okay, we need to, like, sort of make more, I guess, visible creases in the skin, but how do we do that without making them look chunky?
Mm-hmm. You need to add a ton of creases, they need to make sense, and it's also a realistic-looking human face, which we have a lot of practice in spotting problems with.
So it does get a little uncanny valley.
This one, it looks like they mostly painted awkward black lines all over their faces. This might be another one of those problems with HD.
Yeah, maybe it looked better back in the 60s when your TVs were a little fuzzy.
Yeah, lots of things that worked fine back then look like trash in modern resolution.
So we shouldn't make too much fun of it then.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. Sometimes we don't follow our own advice, folks. Apologies.
We have an hour of episode to fill every week. We're going to have to make fun of makeup at some point. Alright, we may as well jump in here so that we can talk about ageism and fun things.
Yes.
I open with Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Chekhov, and a very, very tiny lieutenant named Galloway beaming down to a small research colony for an annual inspection.
We've sort of seen something like this before a couple times.
There is no one there. The crew splits up to try to locate the colonist, and Chekhov goes into a very dark room when the lights automatically come on, revealing a very old-looking dead man. Chekhov understandably freaks out and runs away screaming.
He's found the I don't know, the morgue?
Yes. I mean, it's laid out. It's like an ancient tomb,
yeah,
but with lights.
It's basically just the table, the guy, and nothing else in there. It's kind of weird.
Yes. 4 lights that just automatically turn on when you get next to this dead body. This is the only thing in the room.
It's very overly dramatic for no reason. But anyway.
McCoy examines the body, reporting that he did indeed die of old age, but according to Spock, none of the colonists were very old.
How old were they? Like 40s, maybe?
Well, just then, a very old couple show up. They are introduced as Robert and Elaine, both of whom report that they are in their late 20s.
Oh, it's even worse than that. There's something amiss going on.
Both of these people look to be somewhere around 80.
Yes.
In fact, one of them is the person we were just talking about, who's the oldest actor in the show.
Felix fellow.
They bring the pair to sickbay, where they try to question Robert about what happened, but he is not lucid and is basically unable to understand anything that they're trying to ask him about. Kirk leaves to join a briefing to work out what on earth is going on with the colony. Here we meet Commander Stalker, who really wants to get to a starbase, and this is his one and only character trait.
Yes, Commodore, not Commander.
Ah, Commodore, yes. And Dr. Wallace, who is an endocrinologist, but this does not really come up much.
Basically, they needed an extra doctor.
The gist of the meeting is that the colonists are growing old faster than they should be, and they have no idea why. Though maybe it has something to do with Romulans, because they are, in fact, next to the neutral zone.
Yes, in fact, I think they name-dropped the name of the sector, and that comes up, like, in Star Trek 2, I think.
Oh, I missed that.
Like,
That's
yes,
fun.
We're near the neutral zone in this sector, and oh god, we're being attacked by Klingons. What?
The crew leave, but Wallace stays because she is in fact Kirk's ex, and they want to go all kissy-face at each other.
Wait, we have another one of Kirk's exes just suddenly randomly on the Enterprise? How small is this universe?
Or how many people has Kirk dated?
These are both kind of concerning questions.
But Kirk is called off to the bridge. There's a very awkward line in here where she, asks him why he never wondered why she got married after they broke up. And it's like, you need a reason to move on with your life after ending a relationship.
But, of course, everyone's just so smitten with Kirk that they can never find love elsewhere. Don't you know that?
Spock called Kirk to the bridge to tell him about how they don't know anything, but there was a comet that they're looking into.
Some sort of, I don't know, Day of the Comet situation here?
Yep. Also, Stalker still wants to go to his starbase.
I'll go to the starbase, man. Come on, let me go. Just right over there, right?
Kirk leaves the bridge, but on his way out, he repeats an order which he gave earlier.
Dun dun dun.
Galway reports to sickbay with some minor hearing loss. McCoy basically dismisses her. Kirk calls Spock from his quarters to tell him to look into the comet, even though he already did that earlier. Again.
And I think this is about when he gets his first weird twinge of pain.
He reports to sickbay, where Robert has just died. Scotty calls up to ask if he can come to sickbay, which I thought was weird that they have to call and ask if they can come to the doctor. Okay.
Well, McCoy could be busy. He does have some weird patients who are dying of old age for no reason.
True.
Yeah, he might be busy.
Kirk and McCoy both make fun of each other for looking a little bit grayer than usual, which they do. Nobody, like, they're in their old age makeup, and everyone's still oblivious at this point.
Well, they sort of stage it up throughout the episode. And it's also obvious that they're wearing makeup at this point, but it is not as ridiculous as it gets later.
Yeah. Kirk is there to have his shoulder pain looked at, but when McCoy scans him, he is very surprised to find that he has advanced arthritis.
Oh no! Have you been aging up that particular arm, or are we going to scan the rest of you too?
Scotty enters looking like the world's saddest basset hound.
Yes, and his makeup job is already a few stages up.
Yeah, he has really, really just pure white hair. And it's very sad looking. But this is the only time we see him in the entire episode. So I guess they had to do something.
Well, they do have him sort of at a later part, the hearing situation there. But he's just sort of kind of there.
Yeah, just sitting around. So the basic gist is everyone who was on the away team is now exhibiting signs of advanced aging, except Chekhov, who is fine.
That's because he's secretly a member of the Monkees.
The monkeys never age.
Exactly.
Basically, they all have about a week to live. Also, for some reason, the cognitive decline is advancing faster than their normal physical aging.
This way, we can have them exhibit the late stages of like dementia and things like that without having too much makeup.
But Spock's going to be fine for a bit longer because he is a longer-lived Vulcan.
So, he can go well past 100 and not be too bad.
Wallace flirts with Kirk a bit more. He gets mad because she thinks it's a pity flirt.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
Yeah. There's some weird flirting throughout the episode between the two, and this is maybe the most like, what?
Yeah, it's just dumb. It never even pans out to anything. They're just there.
I guess there might be some sort of motivation for having it, but I'm not really seeing it.
Kirk returns to the bridge, but he is not doing well. He's repeating orders, forgetting things that he just did, not remembering that the Romulans broke encryption code 2 a few weeks ago, and falling asleep in his chair.
Yes. Yeah, this code 2 thing is actually important. We'll get to that later.
But good news, Spock knows that the comet is what spreads some weird radiation on the colony that is the cause of their advanced aging.
Oh, radiation? Is it alpha radiation, beta radiation, gamma radiation, something else?
It's something else. I don't know. Okay. Green. It's green radiation. I imagined it as green, even though I don't think they ever said anything.
Yeah. Well, it could be pink energy. I hear
pink
too
energy?
Much pink I hear too much pink energy is dangerous.
Is that like the pink tax?
I don't know. I was actually referencing Power Rangers.
Also, Stalker wants to go to a starbase.
Just in case you forgot.
Yes.
He's now at least using the excuse that, like, yeah, we got more facilities over there. We might be able to, like, save you guys' lives.
But they have no reason to stay. They just keep going like, nope, we're going to stay here.
Yeah, it's like, we have our data on the thing that probably did this, but we have to stay.
Stalker pulls Spock aside in the hallway because Kirk is very, very obviously not fit to command the ship. And it is his duty to convene a hearing to determine if Kirk is in fact very, very obviously not fit to command the ship.
Yes, this is like something we should be able to do in like 5 minutes, guys. Kirk is really declining fast here, so.
Spock initially refuses because no particular reason, but mostly because their practice of having the entire command crew beam down for every away mission is biting them in the ass because now they don't have anyone left to take over.
Yeah, well, we do have this Commodore guy. He's technically able to be in charge, but there's maybe some issues with that.
Maybe. This is like the third time a Commodore has showed up and taken over. And now we're supposed to think it's horrible for some reason. He doesn't even act like he's a superior officer.
And yeah, in fact, he's very like, this is your ship. I'm going to let you run things. until you're not competent to do such.
We get a quick scene where Galway dies, just to remind us that they're all gonna die, supposedly.
Because main characters die on the show all the time.
But they, for some reason, decided that she needed to be 10 years younger than Kirk. I mention it specifically, I guess because having a woman older than 20 on this ship is going to be gross or something. And then she dies first because her metabolism's different.
So she internalized the radiation faster, and yeah.
There is an interminable courtroom scene to get Kirk removed, where they go over every single thing that we have already seen.
Yes, so it's the part of the episode that's kind of not a flashback of the rest of the episode, but it is kind of.
Mm-hmm. And it goes on just way too long.
Yes. Is this where you nodded off?
Yes, it definitely is.
Don't worry, some of the people there at the meeting are also nodding off, so.
They basically decide he is not fit to command the ship anymore, but he gets old person crotchety about it and gets mad that they're giving it to Stalker. Yeah. Stalker takes over, orders that they go to his starbase finally, and to do so, they're going to cut across the neutral zone to save time, apparently.
Wow, this is a terrible idea, but okay.
Yeah. He's supposed to not be a good commander because he's never had a field command, but this seems just next level stupid.
Yes.
It's like, we need to get to the starbase. Take the direct route. You mean by breaking our interstellar treaty? Yeah, sure.
So their lives is more important than the millions of lives that will be taken if there is another massive interstellar war.
If Kirk could just let him get to his starbase. This needs to be a starbase so bad.
Maybe the Commodore is secretly like some sort of transdimensional entity, and there's something at that starbase it really needs to get to in order to survive. That's my headcanon now.
Kirk is super angry about not being in command. He thinks Stalker's going to get them all killed. He's probably right. He's upset at Spock and Wallace for realizing that he wasn't fit to command.
And in fact, there's a good exchange around here somewhere that between Kirk and Spock specifically, where Kirk's just so outraged, like, I never want to see you again, sort of stuff. Like, this is like some kind of like punch in the gut sort of interactions they're doing here.
Yeah, they break up. Briefly, though.
Yes. They'll get over it by next episode.
Well, they all spend some time going over everything that happened to the planet to try to figure out why Chekhov is fine. And then they remembered that Chekhov got scared by a dead body. And when you're scared, your body fills with adrenaline. Also, adrenaline used to be used to treat radiation poisoning before they discovered their better future treatments. So maybe if they use adrenaline, they can stop aging.
We'll have to mix up some sort of special syrups to do this, and then everything will be fine, or we'll all die. We're not sure yet.
One of those. Meanwhile, Stalker is leading the ship to its doom, and they are surrounded by Romulans. Stalker alternates between not giving orders and wanting to surrender.
And it's like a lot of Romulans, too, like kind of like a whole fleet for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I guess they did just detect an enemy ship entering the neutral zone that is defined by treaty as a no-go zone.
It's like, obviously, this is some sort of invasion. Alternatively, the Romulans were actually like already hiding there and like preparing for an invasion of their own. And they're like, holy crap, we've been caught. Either way, it's bad.
Kirk gets pretty agitated about how the ship is under attack, decides to take the first cure, even though it's possible it might kill him. But at this point, it's like the third most likely thing to kill him in the next 10 minutes. So why are they all so worried about it?
Dramatic tension. This is the most important thing that's going to get everyone killed at this moment. Now we're on the bridge, and that's a different thing that's going to get us all killed this exact moment. Oh no!
This is what happens when you layer too many ticking clocks on top of each other.
We've seen this problem before in this series.
There's also a lot of really awkward shots of Kirk's groin while he's being cured.
That's how you avoid having to see him de-aging in real time. You just look at his crotch instead.
Just keeps cutting from reaction shots of people to his crotch.
Is this what they're looking at? Is this how they gauge how old he is?
Yeah, it's like a sundial.
Bravo, Gedwin.
Kirk, now back to normal, runs to the bridge and takes command. He has Uhura send a message to Starfleet with code 2 from earlier.
Yes, that one the Romulans broke.
See, now he knows what he's doing and remembers things. In the code, he announces that because they are surrounded and doomed, he is going to have to use the Corbomite device to blow up the ship, destroying everything in a 200,000 meter radius.
Corbomite? I think we've seen this maneuver before.
The Romulans pick up the message and back off, giving the Enterprise room to get away.
And then they fly to Warp 8.
Kirk chastises Stalker for wanting to go to a starbase, and McCoy shows up and lets them know that everyone is fine now. There's an ending joke, but it's not that good and it's hard to explain. So the end!
Yeah. The end! So, that was the Deadly Years.
Yeah, it was pretty uneventful. And
I think that the thing that I like most about it is that there was some good character interactions in between the kind of what the hell parts.
The most of it went on just so long. It was very drawn out.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a sprinkling of good stuff and a lot of like, eh.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But one interesting thing, I had to look this up because they went adrenaline used to treat radiation poisoning. We go, that can't be real. But apparently the Russians were doing tests of adrenaline to treat radiation poisoning in the late 50s, early 60s.
No, so wait a moment. Are we sure it's not just that Chekhov is a Russian and that's why he was able to survive via adrenaline?
I think that they mentioned that at one point, but I mean, it obviously didn't work very well. There's no way to cure radiation poisoning, but they tested this as well as a bunch of other stuff back in the 50s.
So maybe we should talk a little bit about how you treat radiation and radiation sickness and all that then.
Sure, by dying. If you either get too much of it or you don't.
Kind of, yeah. It's kind of a if or sort of thing, and there is sort of the in between bit where you just get horrible cancers later in life, but it's still effectively dying from it. It takes longer, but you can. It really kind of comes down to reducing exposure as opposed to treating the damage that's already been done. And so if you're like been sprayed with like radioactive material, you want to get that stuff washed off you as quickly as possible. If you've like ingested something or have been breathing in radioactive dust or something like that, there are, depending on what is the materials you're interacting with, there are chemicals and things like that you can take that will help flush them out of your system faster. But it also kind of requires that to be at all relevant for the sort of exposure you're dealing with here, and so you might be able to get through it okay. You might be able to get through it okay for now, or you're going to be dead pretty soon, depending on the exposure and type of radiation involved. So yeah, it's sort of kind of not necessarily up to you how things turn out.
I was looking it up, like it just stumbled on a guide when I was looking up whether adrenaline actually did anything. And it's just basically the time, distance, blocking things, be far away from as much radiation as possible.
Yes. So sort of some disclosure about my own background here is that for a summer number of years back, I actually worked at a particle accelerator.
Oh.
Yes. And they had us wear radiation badges and things like that. But these aren't the kind of radiation badges where they like change color or do something when you get some sort of like a certain level of exposure. It's more of we've already sort of tested your environment, and unless there's some horrible accident, the concern is more of your slow buildup of radiation over time, as opposed to individual, the instantaneous, input of radiation at any given moment. And so this, device will be used to sort of measure your long-term exposure and be able to sort of tell us, okay, we need to take you out of this environment because you're getting too much exposure, and then move you somewhere where there's less radiation exposure. And so it's very much a planning sort of stage as opposed to a reaction sort of stage. And really, when you're dealing in an environment where that is a concern at all, having some forethought and long-term monitoring like that tends to be more useful than like, have a badge that changes color, we need to get out of here sort of stuff. Because usually when that's the case, if you're using a device of that sort of intention, it's probably already too late.
Yeah, this is the "you're gonna die" badge.
Yes, if it turns purple, you aren't going to have kids. If it turns red, you're already dead. But now, it is, you're completely right about, things like blocking and distance and, all that fun stuff. The particle accelerator I was, involved with there had a pretty intense beam overall. And but the direct beam itself is not something that, necessarily was worried about, because it was, going a certain direction, and that was not where we were standing. It's all about the scattering and things like that. And, is there going to be some, impact of the beam at this location? Is that going to, scatter and cause radiation coming at the control center here or not? And there's plenty of tests to sort of try to make sure that wasn't the case.
So they want one of those movie accelerators where it's a massive tube that you stand inside and you see all these weird purpley particles come fly towards your nanogun or whatever it is you're trying to empower with magic radiation juice.
Not like that at all. And in fact, there was no sort of direct view into the beam enclosure at all.
Then how do you know things are happening if you can't look at the invisible particles?
Magic crystals. I'm only half ridiculous there with the term magic crystals. Actually, there's these scintillator crystals which absorb radiation and then emit visible light that's then detected by electronics. Can give you some idea of where your beam is going and what location it is. There's also other detectors we're using, including the ones I was working on when I was there, such as wire chambers, where you get, the particle beam coming in is a charged particle beam. It's made out of protons. So if you were to, say, have a electric field in an area, you could accelerate certain particles to a certain direction, and they will, interact with, some sort of gas, causing secondary radiation, which is then also charged, to then get accelerated further in certain directions, and you can pick up that by collecting on conductive wires, and that feeds into electronics. You're just measuring the current in that case, and so you're basically turning high energy particles into electric current, which you can then read out a detector, and that can tell you, depending on which wires it's hitting, where the particle beam is.
Well, that's fun.
That's how you know.
But did any of it magically make you age faster?
Nope.
You're actually 10 years old.
Surprise! I think the most technically dangerous things that were going on in the environment there was the high voltage lines and the tent that was periodically filled with pure nitrogen. So don't be in there when it's filled with pure nitrogen.
Yeah.
Just suffocate.
Well, that's not too dangerous, apart from the not being able to breathe it.
Yes. You could leave pretty easily, for instance, and it was pretty leaky as well, so you could probably get out of there without too much trouble. Also, the nitrogen was never turned on when there was access allowed into the enclosure, so that was also part of the procedure. So it goes back to the whole planning thing. You avoid danger by thinking ahead.
That's why all superhero genre things have very, very poor lab safety.
It's either someone forgot something very important, or there's just so many random, convergent events that make all the safeguards and things like that just kind of fall apart.
Oh no, we didn't make a way to get out of the radiation chamber from the inside once the countdown started. Why?
Whoops.
Why would you do that?
Because if the door is left open, it could irradiate the entire lab building. Well, why don't we just shut the door after we leave? I don't know.
These people have never heard of fail-safes, but then we didn't have superheroes.
True.
Well, that's the fun, light part of the episode, is the radiation.
Yes, radiation. And this is without getting into the different types of radiation, too, and the various effectiveness and dangerousness of all those. But that could be for another time.
Well, now we get to talk about ageism.
Yep. So, you kids these days, and your fast cars and your Pokemons, and we're going to be ridiculously angry about stuff.
Well, this episode was a little bit surreal, because having been born in the 80s, I have never encountered anyone in this show before they were in their 60s.
So it's sort of like this is trying to preview how they'll be when we know them.
So like now, everyone who was in this show is like in their 70s and 80s. And this show is like basically saying, oh, when they're old, they're going to be all useless and senile.
And really only Shatner, you know. But it is kind of telling that this is a very much a view that once people sort of hit a certain age, they quote become useless in some fashion, and that's not really true. People can have certain conditions that make them less able to do things, but they're not going to be like, well, you've hit this point in your age, so you're going to have to be discounted now. That's just ridiculous.
An interesting thing, because the way that they demonstrate aging in the episode is basically just a collection of old people tropes. They get unnecessarily angry at little things, which they always do, so that's hard to tell, but more so. They get forgetful. They start repeating stuff. Like 90% of what they do with Kirk to demonstrate that he's not fit for command is he's getting forgetful. And I was doing a little bit of research on this because I wanted to figure out about what time period this started, because it's not normal in societies generally. Probably the Industrial Revolution, no one's completely like pinned it down because these cultural shifts happen slowly. But I did stumble on a very interesting study out of the university, or the Oregon State University, that basically found that when we consider someone old, it is not because they are old, but it is because they are exhibiting behaviors that we associate with being old.
Yeah, I can see that.
So someone's actual age is completely immaterial. The things that we consider make someone old are the stereotypes that they were doing in this episode, being forgetful, having trouble getting around, not being able to understand things as much, including in this study they specifically mentioned going to places with someone else, because they mentioned someone who brought their children into a doctor's appointment, and that made the doctor assume that they didn't understand what was going on, so they talked to the children instead of the actual patient. So we don't so much have a thing with people aging as we do with people not being as independent as they once were, which is a major problem we have currently with our overvaluing of independence and individualism and self-reliance.
And when you are told your whole life that your value is attached to how able you are to do things on your own, and you're no longer able to do that so much, that can be kind of a massive punch to the gut.
There's this weird thing that's actually become kind of a dismissive trope, that people who are older will constantly say that in the olden days you used to respect your elders. And that's actually pretty true, because it's not very common in even other cultures, and in our culture even like a couple decades ago, that we were so dismissive and hateful of the elderly. In fact, before even like the 1950s, it was very common to have multiple generations living in the same home. The 50s kind of developed this idea of the 3 to 4 person nuclear family, and you'd take old people and move them off somewhere else.
The old folks' home, or the retirement community, or Florida in general.
And we've even kind of infected other cultures with this idea. Like there's goods and bads, but in a lot of other cultures it is kind of considered a child's duty, like the first child or second child. It depends on the culture, but one of the children will have kind of the duty to look after their parents as they age. But that's become incompatible with Western consumerist life that has spread everywhere. So it's becoming an issue for some people.
And and some folks are also terrible caregivers, and so there are instances where people try to do that, and they're also incompetent at it, and so kind of like makes you kind of worried about what's going on over there.
But there's just a thing, like people used to be just a part of the community for their entire lives. And I found this interesting thing when I was researching this, because there's like 2 schools of thought that seem to be kind of swirling around with this. Is either old people are still useful and we're ignoring it because they have a lot of accumulated knowledge and life experience. Or the accumulated knowledge and life experience of older people is now useless because we invented Google.
I'm not sure I'd be 100% in either camp, honestly.
Well, I think you hit a very basic problem with this, which is a problem with a lot of our modern way of thinking, in which the basic assumption here is we need to figure out what old people are for and then decide whether we need that anymore.
And so instead of, just treating them as people first, and then if something else happens, cool, but if not, that's also all right.
Yeah, well, you run into a problem when you have to figure out what people are for. Because if you can't determine what someone is for in a useful, productive sense, then they are a surplus person, and we don't like surplus people.
Surplus population, Scrooge was talking about.
Which I was reading about. That's he was in a fight with someone who was having overpopulation views at the time, which is why that's in Christmas Carol, that particular line. Yes. There was somebody who was a contemporary with Dickens who said that. He was talking about the surplus population and people that need to just die out to let modern industrial life move forward.
So in case anyone was ever wondering if people having XPs of people in their real lives in stories is a new thing or not.
Well, this is like this sort of overpopulation idea is something that has been happening since the 1800s. It was something that came about with industrialization because you needed fewer people to make things, and then what do you do with all these fewer people? And you have the poor people who are the problem. It's basically every bad overpopulation trope you've ever heard. That's why if someone tells you there's too many people on Earth and that's the problem, you should get away from them quickly.
Yeah, they've decided to jump on a series of assumptions that are just kind of generally ridiculous and hostile to any sort of working for a better society.
Yeah, particular assumptions that haven't been questioned in a couple hundred years here.
Let's question some assumptions.
Yeah, I had this, this is like sort of a background opinion I've had for a long time, but I had this interesting idea while I was researching this today. And just like, I don't understand why people are so dismissive of ageism generally. Because, while we should care about people, and I'd agree that we just need to treat all people as people and be nicer to each other, so all of this stuff matters. Ageism is the one thing that's guaranteed to hit everyone.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how white, straight, and whatever you are. You're gonna get old.
And so this will eventually hit you too.
I think the general assumption, especially in America, is by the time I am old, because I am a productive, successful member of society who deserves all these things, I'm going to be rich, and therefore it will not be a problem.
I'm going to have immortality, or at least a comfortable senior years there.
Because this is one of those things, if you talk about something like ageism and the dismissing of the elderly, all anyone has to do is point to any old rich person and go, well, they're fine. Look at them. I have disproved your argument. I am clever.
So maybe I should talk about an elderly rich person I ran into a number of years back, and their last few years. And so my grandparents lived in a I guess sort of retirement community for a little while, and eventually ended up at the sort of nursing home for their the last couple of years before they died. But going to visit them, the various couple locations there, I ran into a lot of random folks there, including just a couple individuals that were very well off, and they were very late in life, and they were still basically suffering as much as everybody else there. They were especially in the nursing home situation, which some of them are very good. Others are at best mediocre. Some of them are just terrible. This one was kind of mediocre. They were honestly kind of scared a lot of the time when the occasions I ran into them, because they didn't know what was going on. They were feeling powerless. They were feeling that they were being put upon, and they're also, some of their interactions with the orderlies or whatever, I don't forget the exact term for them, were honestly kind of unfortunate. Some of the folks that worked there were pretty good with what they were doing. Others were kind of jerks, and it's like, yeah, I get it. You work with the older folks here day in and day out, and you maybe as a person this is kind of worn on you, and you've kind of taken on a more confrontational view of your interactions here. And it doesn't matter if this person is rich, poor, or whatever. There's still someone that you are here to effectively, from your view, wrangle in order to get them to do whatever you're here to make them do. And the interactions there were kind of unfortunate. And it's sort of, it's a lot of this sort of stuff left impressions on me that, wow, how we treat old people kind of sucks.
Well, if you treat anyone as a burden, it is going to become a problem. I'm not going to actually say it, but a while ago I read this thing that a very common slur that we use for gay people right now actually originally referred to the elderly. It was an old slang term for a bundle of sticks. And it was originally used for the elderly as a person who is ungainly and hard to get around, like a large bundle of sticks.
That's a weird sort of etymology there. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting when you mention something like a nursing home, because we moved a lot of people to elder care facilities, is the euphemism. And there was supposed to be this idea of, they shouldn't be a burden on their families because, working American man shouldn't have to take care of old people. How horrible. So we can use the wonders of modern capitalism and just make a place where you can pay to have your relatives looked after. Nursing homes are, there's some that are fine, but even the best of them are very weirdly made. And anyone who's been in kind of modern nursing home, I remember my grandmother lived in one briefly. She moved around a lot. She didn't stay in that one very long, but for a little while she was living in one that basically looked kind of like a large, sort of fancy hotel. And there was this research done a bit ago that this common trope of older people being easily confused and lost and, not doing very well mentally, can actually be at least somewhat blamed on the environments in which we make them live. Because having been in some of those nursing facilities and elder care places, everything looks the same. And even I, as a younger kid visiting my grandmother, could never figure out where her room was because every floor, door, and hallway looked identical.
There's no character to it. There's no variance. It is, it's like a standard room format repeated, over and over again. And the only real difference is who happens to be in the rooms at the time and what things they might have there with them. And usually that wasn't much.
Yeah, so this idea that an old person can't even find their way back to their room, well, of course they can't, because you can't either.
Yes.
Because we removed all distinguishing characteristics from the environment in which they live, which is also detrimental to someone's mental health.
So you're in an environment that's hostile to your mental health, that's not useful for your current faculties. So what do you expect to happen,
It's the same thing that we've talked about a lot. The environment in which we put people forces a certain way of thinking on them, maybe is degrading to their lives, but then we use that as an excuse for why we put them in particularly bad situations.
It's kind of a jerk move on our part.
There's quite a few things like that. Even in this episode, I was discussing this a little while ago, the hearing loss that they associated with it. It's one of the running things in this. They have hearing loss. Kirk has to repeat himself to the colonists a couple of times. That's not something that just randomly happens because you got older. If you're older and you have hearing loss, it's because you have several decades of accumulated hearing damage from loud noises.
So, if you work in an environment that has a lot of heavy machinery, or you go to a lot of rock concerts, you're going to get this sort of thing.
Yeah, it just happens. And it can happen at any kind of age, but it's not something that's just going to happen because you get older. It's not like your ears just wear out.
Mm-hmm.
And even the mental decline, it's been shown that a large portion of what we think of as inevitable mental decline in the elderly is just not having things to do. If you continue doing stuff, if you stay active and keep thinking about things and talking to people and doing things with your mind, you don't have the same type of mental decline. Not to say that there aren't certain diseases and things that do tend to hit the elderly at a higher rate. But in general, it's something that doesn't have to happen. It happens because we force a certain way of living on people.
Exactly. This is another story about visiting the grandparents, things like that. My grandfather, on my mom's side, until very late when Alzheimer's actually started, popping up on him, kept his mind actually very, very clear, very sharp by making sure to every single day do the advanced crossword puzzle. I think the New York Times or maybe another paper, and to complete it every single day, and to do that in pen. So, so it's not going to be, I messed up here, I'm going to erase and do it again. He's going to make sure he's 100% correct about every single answer. And that actually did him a whole lot of good, over those years. And it wasn't until the disease struck that he started to be able to operate on all the cylinders there. And even then, he was still very smart. He just was not necessarily the most coherent anymore.
So when we decide to be mean and dismissive of elderly people because of how they are, we need to keep in mind the environment in which our society makes them live. Though interestingly, I did see a study some time ago. It's just one study, but they were saying that crosswords probably aren't actually the best for doing mentally taxing activities because it's just a list of words you already know, and you should be doing something like Sudoku that makes you think logically.
True. That's one of my things I do. But he preferred the crossword because he used to work at a newspaper, and so it's sort of something that he got into way back then, and so maybe there was sort of a connection to the decades and decades ago that let him sort of, it's like, oh yeah, this is something this is a clue that I've seen before, for instance, and so I'm going to use that as an excuse to maybe think about other things, but I don't know what was going on inside his head, so I can't divine all that. But
I've never understood crosswords with the dyslexia. They do not mix very well.
A little more tricksy for you.
Yeah, I'm a pictocross kind of guy.
I don't know what that is.
It's you draw a picture in a grid based on them giving you the number of pixels and what order they appear in each line. I think it's a newer thing because it's mostly on computers.
Well, Sudoku is also where I do my. He's also on computers when I do it. So anyway.
Well, I think we could continue talking a little bit, but I'm just basically going to be reiterating the same points over and over at this point.
We need to be kinder to our older folks, and also to not put them into such terrible situations.
It's been the same for basically every time we've had to talk about something like this in this show. We put people in horrible situations where we don't give them the opportunities to live well, and then use the fact that they're not living well as the excuse for why we put them in horrible situations.
So we should stop doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, see, when I was thinking about what to talk about with this, my mind immediately went to all the standard anti-ageism tropes. Just, people have accumulated experience that you can learn from, and they have not even just historical experience, but mental experience and emotional experience and things that they have a wealth of knowledge that you can draw on. And then I realized that all that is doing, and the only thing that those arguments reinforce, is that you need to have a use for someone in order to treat them well.
And and the moment that use is no longer possible because they're getting to the point in their lives where they're not able to communicate very effectively anymore, then suddenly this argument no longer applies, and then you're back to square one again.
Yes, if you come up with a definition that you need for someone to be useful, inevitably it's going to fail, and then you have a useless person on your hands.
And what happens after that is potentially awful, so.
Yes. People don't need to have uses. People just exist.
Be to be. Anyway, I don't got anything else at the moment. So.
Yep, I think that it might be time for the Galaxy's favorite game show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the game show portion of the show where we tallied up the various points everyone decided to collect up and score for us, and we got some winners for you. And no, none of these awards are about ageism. At least I don't think so. But anyway, the first one is the TV Love Story Award, which goes to Kirk and Dr. Wallace, because this is just too sappy and melodramatic. It just kind of hurts. What do they win, Gepwin?
Kirk and Dr. Wallace win a resort vacation wedding thing because it's basically the most appropriate romance we've seen so far. Like, it's dull, but that's because it's not cringy.
Dull, not less cringe, but also not super useful. But oh well, at least it was better than usual. So our second award is the Incompetent Guest Star Award, which goes to Commodore Stalker for almost getting everyone killed by flying right to the neutral zone. What does he win, Gepwin?
Commodore Stalker gets discharged. Like, this is a level of ineptitude that is unacceptable. Like, I know they kept the entire episode going, he's a pencil pusher who can't really command, but this is just way beyond what anyone in any military organization should be doing.
And isn't he also supposed to be like in charge of this sector or something like that?
Yes. He outranks Kirk.
Yes. So, yeah, I think this one's well deserved. Our final award is the Vorlons in Hyperspace, which also goes to Commodore Stalker for kind of just stumbling to a bunch of Romulans. What does he win, Gepwin?
He wins the Corbinite Award for stumbling upward.
And is he going to explode? At least pretend he's going to be?
Yes. The Corbinite metal will explode, irradiating everything within a 10,000-mile radius for 4 years.
Yeah, so we better watch out for that, everybody. For serious, for reals. Ho-ho! That's, I think, all the awards I got for you, Gepwin. And play us out.
Yes, I hope that all of our contestants enjoyed being in one of the most boring, uneventful shows so far.
Woot for them. Ho-ho!
And thank you all for joining us on the Galaxy's favorite game show.
Well, I think this week I've been more coherent than last week, so that's good.
Well, next week we are on to lucky number 13. 13th episode of season 2.
I hear it's called Obsession.
It is. It's just a fragrance.
You're my obsession.
It's like one of those cologne commercials. Obsession by Kirk.
Which I guess is appropriate since it involves some sort of cloud.
Yeah, let's see here. I don't remember this one. Kirk becomes obsessed with destroying a deadly entity he once encountered in his youth. Oh, we're Ahabbing again. That's fun.
Yeah. Yes, again. I guess, ships in space, Ahabs are going to happen.
This is what people mean by there's only so many basic plots, right? That unimaginative TV writers don't bother to use more than 5 plots.
Yeah, there are more plots out there. They just require a little bit more thought.
I mean, I suppose I can't blame them when they're trying to make a show once a week.
They do have some schedules to keep
and miles to go before they sleep.
Yes. There might only be 50 minutes of television, but there is a lot of work that has to go into production, even of the 60s standards. So.
All right, I don't know much about this one, so sounds like they're fighting another gas monster. Happens.
Yeah, as you do.
I suppose we'll find out more about that next week when you can join us here on Watchers of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, Kirk versus vaping. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.